Managers of Reddit, what is the stupidest thing an employee did that forced you to fire them? I had an employee lock another employee in a closet one time. The person that was trapped called the police from inside the closet. It was quite an hour nightmare. I didn't personally fire this person, but I was manager on duty at a restaurant I work at. Newish server was dealing with a complaint a customer had with their BLT. Rather than having me talk to the table, he took a bite out of it and said, "I'm not seeing the problem." I was assistant manager at a restaurant for a while, and one of the newer bosses had called in 3 times in his first 2 weeks. He called in on Saturday telling me he was deathly sick and couldn't even get out of bed. And around 9 PM after the dinner rush, one of my servers asked me to go check on table 42. I turned the corner and there is the sick busser stoned out of his mind with 2 buddies eating. This actually happened at my current place. We had a secretary. We were all curious as what she really did during the day since it seemed like nothing got done. I ended up giving her lists to complete, but she would throw them in the trash. I got fed up and looked at her computer at the end of the day, which was probably itty on my part. Found out she was prostituting herself with her company email. Every day at lunch, she would drink roughly half of her Jimmy John's, or whatever, soda, then take it with her to the bathroom to fill it back up with whiskey. She did a pretty good job covering up the smell, and since she did it from day 1, it wasn't immediately obvious that she was getting drunk. Found out on day 4 when she knocked her full cup over and we all got punched with the smell of booze in the afternoon. I had an employee apologize to 2 different tables for forgetting to put their food order in. They had been waiting like 45 minutes and nothing had been entered into the system. We looked at the camera system because he had been acting weird all day. After he wrote down their order, he proceeded to go outside and fire up a joint. He was apparently too high to remember to put in the order. It was his first and last day. Edit. Sorry for the confusion. I meant it was his first day on the floor by himself. He had a week's training before. Not me, but my boss. Boss had to fire a lady in our office because she lost her marbles when someone ate her bagel from the fridge. She literally had a tantrum, like a toddler. Also, the girl who ate it by mistake. She thought it was a bagel from the office breakfast we had earlier that same morning. It was in the same packaging as the office stuff. Now, I absolutely hate it when people eat my lunch. But the girl who ate the bagel profusely apologized. Even stated she would go and buy her a new one right on the spot. The tantrum lady couldn't let it go. So, that ended up being her last night. Forging a tip on a receipt. Like adding $20 wasn't going to get caught. Had a server drink out of the customer's Dr. Pepper and Coke to see which was which dart in front of them. 2 new employees got into a physical altercation because one claimed the other wasn't hood enough. It was 2 females and this is an office job. Absolutely ridiculous. I knew someone at Subway who did not get fired for going to the washroom and taking off his pants and underwear. He was making sandwiches wearing only an apron and shirt. The manager laughed at him. I think the entire store must have been on drugs. New guy, around 20 years old or so, called in sick saying he thinks he had a stroke. Since he lived across the street from the store where we worked, we all then stood and watched through the store's glass door as he packed up his truck with beach gear and drove off with his girlfriend. Fired the next day. Hired a girl to work in a bagel store, who on her first day told me she couldn't touch any of the meats because she was vegan. Had another guy show up for work his first day, was doing just fine. Seemed to be good with the job. I went to the office to get some paperwork for him to fill out, and he was just gone. Never came back. Didn't steal anything. No explanation at all. The bad one was had to fire a girl for not showing up for several days in a row. Saw in a newspaper the next week that she had been in jail the whole time because she had locked her kids in a closet while she was buying coke. Back in my days working at a used car dealership, we had a teen come in and test drive a 1,500 mile Corvette. Today's equivalent would be the ZR1. Anyway, the kid drives it around our set loop once, and is being a little waffle on if he wants to get it or not. He says it doesn't really drive as well as he thought it would. My salesman told him it was user error, and he'd prove it to him. They went out for another loop around. With the employee driving it, he managed to get pulled over doing 135 mph in a school zone. Got arrested if I recall correctly. Needless to say, he was not welcome back at our store. However, the team did buy the car. My manager had to fire someone for doing sugar in the toilets and then trying to gouge his own eyes out. I guess that's what working at a call center can do to someone. Not me, but a friend of mine had to fire a sales clerk because she stole computer duster from the office and left the sales floor during her shift to hide in the supply closet and get high with it. Don't do inhalants, kids. Offered a job to a candidate, but had to step out of the office to grab some paperwork. Came back and a bus pass that was on the desk was missing. Newly hired employee stole it. I asked him to return it because a previous candidate dropped it and he said he needed it more than they did and walked out. Sex with underage employee, hitting another employee, getting arrested for drugs, selling drugs, animal abuse, putting freshwater goldfish into saltwater fish tank. Oh, and telling me you can handle any animal only to break down and cry when you have to feed a snake. Worked at a popular pet store chain. Oh, I've got a few. Fell asleep on a ladder on the sales floor. Fell asleep during day 1 orientation training videos. Doing drugs in the bathroom. Getting into a shouting match with a customer right in front of the company president. Fortune 500 company. Shouting I'm drunk as duck right now across the sales floor. Lots of stealing. Not showing up. Stuff like that. Retail. Merch order was coming in. Asked him to perform a specific task related to the order. I went to follow up on a few other things. I come back. He is eating Cheetos walking around the store. I ask him how he is doing with his task. Tells me hasn't started it. I explain why it was important to do it at that moment. Curses me out in front of co-workers and customers. GM fired him next day due to complaints about incident. He was my best friend. He married and had a baby and all that jazz. Haven't heard from him since that day. Guy hired to manage a store in a mall refused to park in employee parking. As I'm sure everyone knows, mall employees have designated parking places, far from the choice spots near mall entrances. This guy refused to park there, and every time he parked illegally, the store got fined $100, and he parked in customer parking every damn day. He was called out on it. The policy was explained over and over. He got written up. He was told that on the next infraction he would be fired, and he did it the very next day. Was totally blindsided when we actually fired him. I fired an employee for being seen on camera throwing silverware and plates into the dumpster instead of washing them in the automatic dishwasher. She was, wait for it, hired to wash dishes. Every year during the holiday season, I'd warn the new hires, listen, no matter how tempting it is, don't steal a customer's gift card. We can track it. I will track it, and if I catch you, you will get fired. Every year people try it. Every year people get fired. Don't do it. They do it anyway. Used to be a supervisor at a big store in college. Other supervisor overhears an employee telling someone he has a joint in his pocket for later. My boss calls the employee into the back office to discuss with HR. HR rep asks him if he does indeed have pot. Response? Nope. I smoked it already. Almost died laughing. Not me, but a buddy from college who was a fleet manager for a trucking company. Trucker comes into his office and says, "Woo, I barely made it. Went over my max hours and had to run a fake logbook to get here on time." He was like, "Dude, you're ducking fired." Okay, it happens. Guys are under pressure and they run a fake logbook from time to time. But don't walk into your boss office and brag about it. He had to fire him. He had no choice. Had a bit of a major meltdown while another employee was training them, claiming they were just greatly disrespected over something. I witnessed it, and all the employee did was point out a safety precaution, and nicely too. When I confronted him about it, he became even more aggressive, claiming that I worship the devil and am part of the Illuminati. So yeah, had to let him go. Starts flipping over desks and stuff. Cops were called, and when the sirens rang out, dude just bolted out the door. Girl decides to start stealing some of our products from the warehouse and sell them on eBay. as brand new. With factory warranty. It only took a couple of weeks before we started getting calls for tech support for products with serial numbers we did not have registered as sold in the system. Brief investigation led straight to her. She is fired, of course, and legal action pursued. But the sad angle to the story is that her father worked there too, and we were forced to make him stay at home with no pay until it could be determined beyond any doubt that he wasn't involved. He stole a bunch of bananas. Seriously, it was a college dining hall. He was an employee of the dining hall and got free meals while on shift. He was not working that day. Walked into the serving area, hid a bunch of bananas in his bag, and tried to pass the cashier, only paying for what was on his tray. When confronted and asked if he had forgotten anything, maybe in his bag, he denied having anything else. Fired on the spot. The worst part, he was on a meal plan, a kind of debit system, except you never get the money back at the end of the semester if you don't spend it. He had plenty of money for the semester. I have no idea why he felt the need to steal bananas. Went outside and smoked a joint while the district and regional manager were there doing inventory. Steal my headphones. They were identical to the headphones the company had purchased for him. He just wanted 2 pairs. Had an employee, male around 22 years old, blatantly and apparently with some force, grab and jiggle the breasts of a 16-year-old female employee. He did not speak English and used fairly obscene hand gestures to convey his defense. His reason for fondling a teenager? Her breasts were very large and he couldn't believe it. I used to manage a pizza chain that rhymes with heaps of schmut. Long day at work was coming to an end when I told a new guy to vacuum the dining area. Came back 10 minutes later and heard a vacuum running but couldn't see it or the new guy. I looked over the bar and saw the new guy vacuuming while laying down. I really wanted to give him points for creativity, but he had been horrible all day, so I'll let him go. I wasn't really a manager. I was a kid who worked at a skating rink, but I was the DJ entertainer. Anyway, we had birthday party clowns. Couple of them were girls. One was an exhibitionist of sorts. She would ask me to help her into her clown costume, on a Z jumpsuit thing. I was happy to help at first. Then she started taking off her clothes to put the costume on, and I was really excited to help, but thought it was a little inappropriate. But she got good tips from the dads. Costumes are pretty sheer. Things escalated to the point that she was pretty aggressively forcing herself on me and getting angry crazy because I wouldn't have a 6 with her under the DJ booth in her clown costume. I end up talking to the owner and manager about it, and she all of a sudden didn't work there anymore. She did come in occasionally, and one time I pulled her and a guy out of the jungle gym thing, like you see in a McDonald's play place, because they were having sex in it. My friend and next door neighbor wanted to leave his IHOP job but had no backup. I decided to hire him on at my own business for a couple dollars more an hour than he was previously making. He had been falling into a deep depression steeped in booze, and I thought I could help him get his life back on track with a bit of extra $. The first week was fine, but when he started to not wake up for work on time or answer his door, I was forced to go to his back door and knock on his room window to wake him up. Since the company was appointment only and we dealt with personal vehicles, being late was a big problem. I politely warned him that he couldn't do that and continue to work here. The problem persisted and I had to let my friend and neighbor go. He is now heavily into heroin and meth and can't find a job. It's seriously the most heartbreaking thing to know that you gave a duck ton of effort to help a friend only to have him be an employee. This is why they say to never hire friends. I used to manage a car window tint shop. We hire some young high school kid to help us clean up, grab supplies, refill inventory, basically whatever we didn't want to do. Kid was a self-proclaimed DJ. Knowing he had school and his shows, I told to give me a heads up when he couldn't make it. We didn't really need him, so he could take off as much as he wanted and we didn't care. Just an extra hand, a day or two every week. He wouldn't show up, won't answer any texts or calls, and then show up like nothing happened. He would post these shows all over social media, so I would text him and ask if he's coming in. I would get tags about coming to this party and events tonight, so I would reply asking if he was calling out. Still no answer, but will come after missing work saying how much he need this job and has a baby on the way. Still in high school. Last straw was leaving mid-shift without a word and while attending the front because he had a show to prepare for. Waited till he showed up again to let him know we didn't need him anymore and he nearly cried, begging us for a second chance. TLDR. Kid with unlimited callouts refused to call out, even when asked directly if he needed to call out. Surprise when he has fired and after missing nearly a third of his shifts.